For the longest time, sales was always considered a vocation. It was very rarely considered a career path. You have an MBA in marketing, MBA in finance, you have an MBA in HR, you have an MBA in agriculture management, but you don't have an MBA in sales.
What's your take on a PMF and when do you know you have one?
It's definitely more art than science, I'd say. It's easy to explain PMF in hindsight, but like when you're in the moment, it's very hard to sort of exactly see those signals and very clearly identify them. There's a CRM called Follow a Boss in the US. Great guys, damn good CRM, only built for real estate. I saw that CRM, I'm like, these guys would do so well in other industries. They didn't bother. They sold to Zillow a couple of years back for $500 million. It's nuts. Get everyone really, really good on using GenAI for research. I think we have all the tools. There's no more excuses. I'm surprised at the number of times people just show up to meetings unprepared. A buyer should walk into a meeting and feel like, holy shit, you know so much about my business already. And that's credibility getting defined right there very, very well. Second is lots of training around emotional intelligence in selling, as well as the storytelling aspect of selling.
So, welcome to Edbound with Kenna. Rishabh, I am so pleased to have you here. I've heard, your, uh, the entire 1.5 hour long presentation that you kind of did. It was such a masterclass and so many great things.
Thank you.
So, I'll tell you that the theme here or the idea here is that we are trying to build a new type of a GTM motion for anybody doing B2B enterprise SaaS sales. And the idea is that people can build their GTM motion not just as a pure outbound, inbound method of the old world, but they can kind of layer it with deep educational content that improves CAC, that improves retention. You can actually get someone to move from just top of the funnel to conversion very fast and in a much better way. So that's the whole idea about what we are trying to build. In that context, I think what I heard during our meeting and when I attended one of your sessions recently with the GTM Dialogue guys, I think I was blown away with the kind of depth that you went to and the attention to detail related to how conversions happen. I'll just ask questions on what do you think about what we have looked at other companies doing so far, and how do you kind of layer what your expertise is on top of that. But before I do that,
Sure.
I think I was super impressed, and I looked at your profile as a co-founder of Squad Stack, and you'd have been in the lists like Forbes 30 under 30 to so many great clients that you've been able to onboard for Squad Stack. So a stellar profile, such a brilliant background, and you are a geek, a learner. So let's just hear from you. What is it that has kept you excited in your journey through Squad Stack and where you built your expertise? So I would love to hear from your mouth.
Super. No, thanks for having me, Kinner. It's the first time I'm doing something like this. So, but, excuse any rough edges on my side. But it's been like I have about 12 years of work experience overall. I started my career in venture capital in 2012. And I think back then I'm the analyst type persona. So I love details. Like that's just something that works well with me. Like most people open up a Google Doc or I open a spreadsheet. So my brain works in Excel, and I think I have this weird knack for being both left and right brain in terms of just loving structure, but also having some room for creativity. And in my early days in my VC career, I just loved getting into details in terms of just analysis, market research, or building financial models, right? And then Squad Stack happened with a bunch of my co-founders who were most of them were friends from my college, and we were a super young 10 people team. And I jumped in without any background of sales and marketing, really. It was all just learning from the ground up. And we were 25. We had no idea what was good or not. And we just sort of ran with a bunch of experiments. And it's been, 9 years since. I think what kept me going was like just my personal evolution in terms of just seeing how the market's changing from how I used to be like one of the most pushy salespeople because I was just like follow up, follow up, follow up. And while that persistence paid off, I think over time, I transitioned myself into almost of a consultant because even till date, what that's done is now, like 2 years later, clients remember you, even if that deal didn't work out at the time. They remember you and saying, "Hey, you know, I loved our chat, and can you help me think about this? Or sometimes people are just, curious about what's going on in the market and they want your help. And I think that sort of made me realize that today modern sellers are not salespeople. We are consultants. It's our job to understand client issues, diagnose them very, very well, have a very good understanding of the market we're operating in. And I think that learning has kept me going because I just love learning stuff about what's going on in my industry, but also what are best practices in selling. And I think that combination, when you feel rewarded with that in a sales meeting, when a client is like, wow, you asked me questions that no one's asked me before, or you made me think so much about this that no one's done before, or you challenged me on these assumptions that no one's done before. I think that keeps me going because it's a lot of fun. Like a lot of sellers say, I got into sales because I like helping people. And I think that's actually one of the most rewarding parts of sales, more than the money and everything else that comes with it. I think just the ability to go and solve someone's problems is extremely gratifying. So I think that's what's kept me going. I know I sort of took a meandering route to answer a story question, but yeah, that's what keeps me going every day in terms of saying, how can I best solve our customers' problems on a day-to-day basis?
No, fantastic. I think it makes sense. It's important to know the story and super interesting to know that you came from a VC background that had a lot of analytical outlook attached to the role itself. And we know that VCs are very number driven and, it kind of also added to what you were trying to do here at Squad Stack and your sales expertise because being data driven is considered a superpower in today's time. I don't think everybody gets it. So I like to start with the first bit of how the journey starts. Now, you kind of talk a lot about how specific attention to detail in the sales process can be a game changer. But let's start from the first problem perspective. We'll spend less time on it, but I want to know your perspective on when you're trying to do GTM. Let's say you're a company just touching 1 million in ARR,
Yeah.
or you're on your way to get to 1 million in ARR. Now, how do you, in your purview, was it has it been part of your profile to look at aspects of GTM, identifying the ICP, or sales has always handed it down?
No, no. So I think when you're in a startup, like the sales lead is really like that's everything, right? You do go to market, ICP identification, find early adopters, like do whatever you need to in order to sell, right? Which in my like I just especially because when you do enterprise sales, I just love getting in front of customers. Like for me, that was the most important high leverage thing I could do. So yes, absolutely. I think figuring out early go to market, what's your ICP, how do you sharpen it? Is it all really in your head or do they actually believe what you're solving, right? Ultimately, we as any founder, you have to be truth seeking and not validation seeking. And I think there was just a lot of constant iteration on early go to market. So we've had our fair share of, pivots and just, going through those motions of testing something, seeing if it's working, repeating it in India, in the US, in Europe, Southeast Asia. So I've sold in multiple countries. And then the same problem set that, India has, the US doesn't. And so there's a lot of learning. And that's when you realize that specificity in GTM is very, very important. So yeah.
Yeah, um, I think you said something really profound here that we should be truth seeking, and that again goes on to talk about your data focus and love for numbers. One of the interesting things while looking for an ICP that I've heard from a lot of founders and people don't get it right. So there's this friend of mine, they've just cracked a series A, a decent size double digit series A, which is a good thing. The way they were able to do this, and they said we only focused from offering our platform to three, four, five types of different audiences. We focused that, okay, we will only do it for automobile, and this is kind of an AI app that builds or gives you better product pictures using
Yeah.
AI. So they said, okay,
Oh
we
yeah,
only,
I've seen the company. I'm
yeah.
missing the name, but I read about them. Yes.
Yeah, so the entire thing around getting that focus that, okay, only talk
Yeah.
about automobile. And they also chose a kind of a geography and focused on it. Now, here there is a bit of a counterintuitive thing where a lot of people feel like, I don't think I want to go with just a small piece of a very niche market. Think of something like a Clay. They didn't say that we will only do GTM for pharmaceutical. They said
Yeah.
we are a GTM platform. That's
Yeah.
sort of a niche, right? That's
Yeah.
picking, I mean, from so many places where Clay could be applied. They said we will
Yeah.
focus on GTM. So I don't know if I'm able to articulate the question. It's like, how do you decide on that? Like, do you go so specific, only automobile, or stay like Clay? Though people compare it that Clay also
Yeah.
went like super niche. What's your take on
No, I
this?
think so. What you're, I think, paraphrasing what you just said, right? Do you go horizontal or vertical, right? So horizontal SaaS, vertical SaaS. I think vertical SaaS is exciting for a number of reasons. Where you have, I think, typically sometimes just taking a step back, right? Like when if you're a founder, and this is not me saying this is one of the best angels, and I forget his name, but I read this in a book. So I find this framework really well, right? As a founder, what are the three things that you have? You have some market traction, size, growth, like the market is good and it's big and it's pulling you, whatever that sharp market is. Second, what is your counterintuitive insight that you believe to be true and not everyone else to be true, right? And then third thing is, what's your founder future fit, right? Like, are you someone that can sort of scale within this industry? So, for example, if you're, let's say, building for the automobile industry, there is a very good chance that as a founder, you have a very unique insight about the automotive industry, having spent some years working in it, or you understand the workflows very, very deeply. Similarly, if you take a space like healthcare, what I think it was the company that built on Salesforce, I think it was Viva, or maybe I'm blanking out on the name, but this entire tech stack built on Salesforce, but only deployed for the healthcare ecosystem because it's such a complicated ecosystem that most people outside in don't get it, right? So it's also a big function of what your insights are in terms of verticality. When you're doing vertical SaaS, sure, your market's a bit restricted, but that's not a bad thing because you can solve much more deep-ended problems, solve end-to-end workflows, and then go capture a really large share of that market. Once you have a good large share of that market, you can move to other markets as well. Now, when you're horizontal, you want to make sure that you're not building for very specific use cases across, providers. For example, with Clay, I think it's a great product. And I think what they've done really well is they've created almost like this channel motion to say, we're going to be a horizontal product and we will certify whoever wants to get certified on Clay to sort of customize this to their industry, because we don't want to get into that heavy lifting of customizing this GTM stack, which is so specific for so many industries. They've sort of created that pipeline, almost like the Lego building block. And I think this really is a function of, can Clay serve the automobile industry? The answer is yes, but will a vertically focused automobile focused player will have a better wedge? Yeah. So I think it's really a function of where you find more expertise and insights. Even if you're horizontal, right? Like you can be horizontal, but very specific. For example, a Clay or a Gong would say, oh, we only want to sell in North America. People who are selling SaaS, people who are selling SaaS on virtual demos, people who have at least 50 people sales teams. And that's still very, very specific. You're still slicing that down a lot further. I genuinely don't think there's a wrong answer in either one of those strategies as long as you're intentional about, where you're going. I think the only thing I can think of adding to this is if you're really genuinely building for horizontal, as a product category, to say, look, I'm going to be a CRM for whoever. More often than not, you will still see that people have to create like this industry's playbook, right? Like they'll any horizontal product you go and you go to industries and they'll say, so, by industry, industry one, two, three,
Yeah,
four,
yeah.
and there'll be certain copy and there'll be certain language and there'll be
Yes.
certain use cases. So you still have to, even if you don't build it out explicitly in the product, your GTM still has to speak the customer's language in terms of, how does this apply to them, even if you choose to be horizontal, right? Like you can't just be like, oh yeah, this can do whatever you want it to do. A customer, we think we've made a product and we assume that the other side understands how to use it. They
Yeah.
don't.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
I think I see that there are solutions, use cases, tabs, which kind
Yeah.
of specifically address the benefits for a certain industry or a certain type of
Yeah.
solution that we are trying to build in the market. Like for an instance, an AI touching tool might just start with automobile, but it'll say, how do you touch up your Amazon products? And the use case
Amazon
might list,
products, real estate,
yeah, real estate or
anything which has SKUs, right? Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
fashion is a big category
Fashion is
that's
a big
blowing up
one.
right
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think so. There are companies approaching it from different angles, right? Like this company is approaching it from automotive, saying, "Look, we will get high value product SKUs really, really right." And then
Yeah.
there's another company entirely approaching it from a fashion angle, saying, "Hey, we'll make user generated content easy, and
Yeah.
your brand photo shoots become really good." So it's like the fashion industry doesn't have has the auto industry has very few structured SKUs compared to fashion, which is like millions of products, versus car catalog will be what, maybe 10,000 at max. I'm just maybe 1,000, actually 10,000 is a lot, right? You will not have more models than that. So the level of depth and the use cases are completely different. So you can't just translate this insight from here to here. You have to be in that such a situation, you have to be more vertically focused, because in order to solve the jobs to be done for that buyer, you have to close the loop. And if that means going vertical and there's enough value in it, you go vertical. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Wow. So jobs to be done. Another interesting framework you'd mentioned, and you referred a book as well. Can you elaborate on that and talk a little bit more?
So jobs to be done is one of my favorite first principles, and it's a very common thing, right? It's not
Mm.
rocket science. It's essentially people buy your product or service to complete a job, right? In very simple words, there are three aspects of a job. There's a functional aspect of a job, which is what is it letting you do. There's an emotional aspect of a job. So functional aspect of a job, most people get, like I buy a car to go from point A to point B. So you're not buying a car to do anything else. You're just buying a car to go from point A to point B. And maybe there are subsets with that, right? You buy an SUV because you want to off road. You buy a minivan because you have kids who want to go to soccer practice or whatever, right? Like so, use case by use case. That's the functional use case. Now, most people get the functional use case. Most people articulate the functional use case. The gap typically is the emotional and the social use case. Emotional use case is how is it making me feel while doing this job? And the social use case is how is it making me look while doing this job? And the big mistake that sometimes, several times marketers as well as sellers make is that they articulate the functional aspect of the job, but they don't describe the emotional and the social aspect of the job. Because ultimately, how something makes me feel and how something makes me look is how most value proposition is articulated or should be articulated, because as people we make emotional decisions. Most buying decisions
So
are emotional.
I have a question that I want to ask here. It's a
Yeah.
brilliant framework. Now let's just pick this example of a company helping automobile companies
Sure.
creating better pictures, right? So jobs to be
Sure.
done. Functional,
Right.
we get to create a great image that people would look at and want to buy a car.
Yeah.
Emotional, would you say that it's like it's
So my workload has reduced so much. I feel like this manual work that used to take me hours is now gone. The
I don't need
constant fear,
designers.
the constant fear I had about variability in design is gone. I have brand safety. I have brand guidelines that are followed. I have speed and efficiency, which lets me focus on the more important things. So there are I'm giving examples because I'm hypothesizing here. I don't know the exact product.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a great example. Another, like, I think if I take a simpler example, CRM, right? Like, what's a CRM supposed to do? Like, functionally, you're supposed to stay in touch with
Records.
customers.
Yeah,
How does
records
it
of your
make you feel
customers.
though? Yeah, but it makes me feel like I'm in control. It makes me feel like I know exactly
Yeah.
what I need to do, right? So that's how, if I positioned a CRM as a tool that lets you stay in control of your follow-ups, that is a much better feeling. How does it make me look? It makes me look like I'm an accountable salesperson. I beat my quota and I look like one of the best salespeople on the team because I'm very
Mm.
disciplined with my follow-up and my CRM. Most salespeople hate the CRM, but point being that you articulate on the emotional and the social aspect of whatever your product is serving.
Yeah.
And that is a very, very important point of any positioning or demo or articulation of the value that we provide. We very focused on, this is my feature, it does these nice things, but you forget what it means to the other side from an emotional and a social standpoint.
Hmm. No, powerful stuff, man. And what is the book you'd recommend to people to read about this if they want to know more?
So jobs to be done is, you don't really need to read a book. Like, just if you just look up jobs to be done, there are enough and more articles on this. It's not a complicated framework. You don't
Okay,
need to read a
okay.
book on this. But there are books on sales, which there are plenty that I can recommend towards
And
the
I'll
end,
pick your,
which I
yeah,
love it.
yeah.
Yeah,
I would love to pick
no,
that
I'm
list.
happy to. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
have a whole
No, I will.
Notion database of all the places that you
Yes.
learn from.
Yeah,
And
we
I
can do
think,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
because that's so impressive, and the way you document everything, and I do the same thing too. Like almost every project I pick, there's a detailed Notion-based workflows, information gathering. So I think, yeah, I feel the
No,
nerd
writing
vibe.
helps you. Writing helps me think better. Squad, we have a very big writing culture as well. I attribute a lot of this to that also. But we're also very inspired by, how Amazon has a very big writing culture in terms of just, writing PR FAQs, writing documents in terms of just how
Yeah,
you're thinking about things. For me, writing has just been a learning thing because I would read a nonfiction book, great book. Oh my God. Like in that moment, I'm enjoying it. And then 30 days later, I actually don't remember any of it. And
yeah,
in my head, I'm like, if I am studying, let's just study. So studying means you take notes and you write what you think, what you observe. That's paid dividends now. 6 years later, I've been doing this since 2020. It's only now that with GPT coming in, I'm now able to take all my notes and then structure and use that as frameworks to like apply to problems, saying,
yeah.
read this book summary and now use this on this problem statement and tell me what you think. And suddenly it's like I have my own knowledge base working for me,
Yeah.
which is something which I also understand intuitively. So it's not like I am, if the bot hallucinates, I can't catch bullshit. And so now
Yeah.
it's actually helping me compound my learning a lot. So yeah, big fan of studying that way. Yeah.
No, that's so impressive. And I was doing something similar this afternoon. Analyzed my token window had gone to 1.5 million tokens, So when I was giving the input, because it
Yeah.
was an hour-long YouTube video that I was trying to kind of crunch and pull out some data from. But I generally use Grok, sometimes ChatGPT, but 1.5 million was no problem. Got like the best output. So I completely align with what you're saying. I think we're living in
Yeah.
magical times, and for science fiction nerds like us, it's almost like the movies we were watching when we were kids. We're
It's
living,
magic. Yeah.
yeah, we're living there,
Yeah.
man. Like I never imagined I'm going to go and live in this time. Just waiting
Yeah.
for the robots now. I mean, I'm sitting here. If I wanted coffee, it would be so nice. I get like a
Yeah.
cup of coffee,
Yeah.
hand coming
Oh
in.
yeah.
That's just the
Yeah. Yeah.
next phase I'm waiting
I have a
for.
pile of dishes pending. Yeah. I want that done. Yeah. I know totally.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, so super super impressive stuff. Let's go from a GTM focus to sales. And I know as a matter of fact, and I've always felt in my heart that almost every conversation that I get into versus when I'm training salespeople and hiring salespeople, one, let me just confess that it has been one of the one of the big failures of my experience as an entrepreneur, not to be able to always hire the best guy. Sometimes when I hired them, I don't know, for some reason the attrition's like so high in the sales domain. Do
Yeah.
you vibe with that? Do you agree that that's like not just me, who's kind of
Oh yeah.
specifically?
For sure. 100%. So look, it's a it's a difficult role for a number of reasons. Right? One is that in a lot of places, and I'll take India as an example, but even the world in general, right? For the longest time, sales was always considered a vocation. It was very rarely considered a career path. And this is reflective of our business schools as well, right? You have an MBA in marketing, you have an MBA in finance, you have an MBA in HR, you have an MBA in agriculture management, but you don't have an MBA in sales, right? Because sales was always considered a vocation for a lot of people because of how the industry was structured. And even today, there's very little academic research from that standpoint in selling. Now that ultimately starts to reflect in the value that's prescribed to selling as a career for a lot of people. Unfortunately, for entry level roles, sales is a great place for a lot of people to start their careers. Like there was so much research on how some of the best CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are actually salespeople before, and they
Yeah.
rose through the ranks, right? So it is one of those best paths. Unfortunately, it is a difficult career. It's like any career. If you have to really make it, it is not easy. Now, there are two sides to this, right? Which is one, how do I hire the right salespeople? Second is that, is my product ready for those salespeople? And I think sometimes, I have seen founders make this mistake of saying, somehow if I just hire a seller, my life will get solved. And this person's responsibility is to sell my product, no matter how shitty or not ready my product is, right? From a market standpoint. And so that's the first problem, right? Like you start pouring fuel on the fire when you are not ready for it. And no matter how good a salesperson someone is, no one can sell a bad product or a product that the market isn't ready for, or a product that is not ready to compete with what the market is already offering, right? So no seller can do that. And so it's sometimes founders misplaced notion that somehow a seller can come in and do it, which is why founder-led sales becomes very important in early days, right? You as a founder
Yeah.
have to get in there and find a way to get a few early customers, paying customers who are validating the problem that you're solving, who are giving you signals of product market fit. You understand what the market needs. And then don't hire a VP, hire a junior person, someone like with maybe 2 to 5 years of experience, who will help you, accelerate this product market fit discovery. This person may not even immediately carry a quota, because it's a lot of pressure to put on someone when you don't yourself know where your product is landing, right? Like this is sometimes a notion that it sometimes doesn't work. So you that's one of the reasons why salespeople fail. The second is that you hire incorrectly. Like you hire someone from a branded place, for someone who has far more experience than you
Yeah.
probably need, and they come from a really large brand. And so look, someone, if your salesperson is from Oracle or IBM, they're not going to work in your startup. And again, this is not me saying, this is very age old yarn that's come out, right? So we typically have this tendency to look for brands and say, oh, they've sold this product, and that's a big mistake, because the brand sells itself over time. I think the third thing is just, the this person typically is an entrepreneur, early sellers, right? Like from a culture standpoint, you want someone who is okay with variability, with things not being perfect, with just stuff getting built out. And a quota carrying blue-blooded seller will just be like, oh my God, there's nothing here, right? Like that is a person you bring when you have, let's say, 5 people on. So early days, you bring on someone who's extremely entrepreneurial, high energy, okay to work with, broken systems, broken processes, just has a crazy bias for action. So that's the third piece, which is, are they a cultural fit from an early stage employee standpoint? And I think yeah, so I think those are the big ones. I think there's another fourth one, which may just be an India problem. I've seen that people, because sales is a commission carrying role,
Yeah.
right? In a lot of cases, people put ridiculous commission splits of base variable where someone is squeezed out, and it causes more harm than good, because I'm a fundamental believer that, people should be paid fairly and enough of a base so that you're not worrying about putting food on the table. No one wants, everyone, as an individual, you need psychological safety in order to do your best work. If you have that, which means you're paid reasonably well, you will perform much better. If you're constantly worried about, making money to put food on the table, you may end up misselling, you may end up, selling or doing the wrong things. And I think that's also something that I've seen as one of the challenges, especially in early stages, right? Late stages, you have a product market fit, motion, you have a bunch of quota carrying reps, your quota numbers are hitting, the math works, you can show that as proof, great, do it then, right? Early stages, forcing someone down that path, yeah, causes attrition as well. So those are the 3, 4 top reasons why attrition happens. That's been at least my experience. Yeah, let me know if any of these If there's anything that you want to add to this that you experienced at your end that I've not covered.
No, I think you covered the right points. I possibly the other thing that I saw was there's a very different world that exists in India at times, especially in the funding frenzy, related domain. So, for an instance, let's
Huh.
take products that companies like Byju's or White Hat were selling. Sometimes the LTV could be so low that you're selling a
Yeah.
15,000 or 20,000 rupee product, right? And that
Yeah.
is almost like a call center sale. So it's not enterprise, the type of person that you're going to hire, the background that they come from. So all that you said, it's the enterprise sales world or mid-market SME sales world, right?
Yeah. I
That
I wore that hat. Yes.
yeah, so you
Yeah.
understand like how, and it's an interesting question because that's what we were doing. Like when we were building our company Nourish, which was fundamentally offered to yoga trainer, dance teachers, and experts.
SMEs. Yeah,
Not
yeah.
even
It's
SMEs,
very like a
single person
B2C
company.
sale.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
yeah, yeah.
person
It's like a
company,
B2C SaaS sale.
B2C,
Yes. And that's
B2C.
run by an inside sales team. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Understood. No, so even there, right? Like the inside sales team, be it selling SaaS, like we have a bunch of sellers in India today that sell India to US SaaS or SME
Oh yeah,
SaaS,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
SME
yeah.
SaaS, for example, Class Plus is a great example, which runs a fairly large SME SaaS sales team. They've
It's
been
not
one of
SME.
Scott's
It's again the same audience, the
individual.
tuition,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the tuition
Yeah,
center, or not even a
yeah, yeah.
multiple people tuition center. Their
Micro
biggest,
SME, whatever you
yeah,
want to. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
think
So
individuals.
ultimately, yeah, yeah. The motions are very similar to B2C, but you're technically selling to a small business, so to say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's the only
yeah, yeah.
distinction. But the behavior patterns, the decision process, completely. And I think there again, the challenge is that look again, Scott's like we run call centers as well, right? Like that's the core business of the company. We run inside sales for other businesses. ClassPlus is an example. We actually run their lead qualification pre-sales department for the last 5 years. We set up
Wow.
qualified appointments for their sales team. So there, I think two big learnings. One, pre-sales is separate from sales. There's someone whose job is
Mm,
to set up the demo, and there's someone whose job is to convert the demo. You so many times companies get salespeople to set up the demos as well, which is a volume activity, and the sale in itself is a very contextual activity, which could be like 30-minute webinars or demos like this, right? And those skills are very different. The inside sale appointment setting skill, be it with inbound leads, is different, outbound leads is different, and selling is different. And so many times we just get one person to do all three, and that doesn't work. So that possibly happens a lot from what I've seen with inside sales teams from a churn standpoint.
yeah.
That's an The second thing is an India problem where a lot of early talent comes in and call center jobs are all they have,
Mm,
unfortunately. It's not a bad start. It's not easy. The call center cultures can be very, very problematic. Everything from, not saying teams do this, but we've heard like, stories of everything from someone tracking your bathroom breaks to like, just yelling at you because you're not
yeah,
hitting your number, right? And we've all now in hindsight heard the toxic stories coming out of the large ed tech players over the years, right?
yeah.
So obviously that's wrong on all levels and not something that should be done because this ultimately is the front line that's representing your product to your
Mm,
customer. If they're making a forced sale because they're desperate to hit a number, it will lead to churn because you sold a bad fit product to a
yeah.
bad fit customer. And that's a never ending tale of, just disaster waiting to happen because, good GTM can mask bad product market fit.
Mm,
So
yeah.
that's the other reason why like we expect a lot without actually understanding why PMF is happening. And then when PMF happens, then you put fuel on that fire and you grow rapidly, right? And there's so many companies that have done this really, really well. You take like Odoo, for example, done beautifully on inside sales, led motions, or Rippling, another example. They do really good
Mm,
work on inside sales, right? So there are ways to do it. Have the right inflection points to say,
yeah.
my team is ready to sell this product and the market is ready to accept this product.
Yeah. No, you've done it for so many brands, and like you rightly kind
Yeah.
of mentioned that it changes, and that's one lesson that I learned later. That okay, split out the pre-sales and the sales team, and then the demo team is different. But obviously the evolution was that I eventually realized that this is a rat race. I'm not selling to this audience because like, I think there's a founder product fit as well. Like you get into something, and I think it's just not product market fit. There's also a founder product fit.
Founder, yeah.
And yeah, so I realized that I really like to sell to companies and organizations where it could have like a much bigger impact. And I think it's also a function of trying to find blue ocean, specifically when there are too many competitors. So
Yeah.
that angle brings me to an important question, which is a beaten to death question, but I think I still like to ask, because product market fit is, some people say it's an art, not a science. Some
Yeah.
people, some investors and some like really smart people on my cap table have told me that it's like the classic definition when people are, you don't have enough capability to supply to so many customers, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
PMF. A lot of people disagree with this. They're like, okay, that doesn't happen for a lot of very fast moving companies. What's your take on a
Yeah.
PMF, and when do you know you have one?
It's definitely more art than science, I'd say. It's easy to explain PMF in hindsight, I think. Somehow it's
Okay,
like
that's a
very
good one.
easy to like, oh yeah, like yeah, PMF was
Yeah,
obviously there, yeah. But like when you're in it, right? Like when you're
yeah,
in the moment, it's very hard to sort of exactly see those signals and very clearly identify them. And so many times, again, like as founders, we like validation. So we're like, oh yeah, we're getting validation. Let's move. And somehow that's a signal of PMF, but we don't sometimes see the entire cohort of that, of the retention cohort of that customer. So I think one, yeah, all of these things, right? Like the superhuman framework, which is 40% of people will say they will absolutely, feel bad if the product is no longer with them, to like, the market is pulling you so much that you just can't supply enough. Like the market's just really pulling you towards that, like, I need this today. And stuff like that happened to like some of the best of companies. Wiz is a great example of that recently. 4 years, 750 million ARR, right? Like it's just ridiculous. Or some of these new AI apps that are just breaking all records of what ARR growth looks like. So that's like ultra strong PMF. But it does take time. Bolt went from 0 to 40 or 750K to 40 mil ARR very quickly once this AI wave came about. But they were struggling for several years before that. I think what we sometimes discount in this PMF discovery is market timing. None
mm,
of us can time the market really, really well. There are so many external factors, right? Like we look at the pandemic, caused massive headwinds or tailwinds for all types of businesses. EdTech went up, real estate went down, just stock market apps went down, then went up again. There is so much that you can't control. As founders, we think we can control a lot of those things, we can't. So I think it's very important that we be disciplined in order to figure out the right customer set, the right messaging, the right product fit, the
yeah.
retention, the pricing, all of those variables, you keep figuring it out. And there's a point where the market just starts working and starts making sense. And I think that requires patience. Some companies time that really well. It could be luck, it could be skill, I don't know. And some companies take much longer, but the market is the one variable that you don't really control. And I think that's a factor that most PMF doesn't sort of account for.
So, good follow on question here that I feel could be an anti PMF story here is that a lot of Indian companies that were built during the pandemic, even now, are
Mm.
a replica of what's already been done in the US. In
Yeah.
fact, a lot of times the US counterpart could just be an exact damn replacement of the same product. Let me just give you one
Yeah.
example. So I'll not take names of the companies, but let's pick a CRM. We know there are two, three big CRMs that have hit
Mm.
$1 billion mark in India, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we know that there are Indian companies that have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, you could easily replace these Indian CRMs with something that already existed in the US and possibly
Yeah.
of a bit of a finer quality in terms of the UX, the robustness of their product, and a lot of other things. How do you define PMF for them? Because they weren't even building a CRM going, like a niche or a vertical approach and saying, we are a CRM for health tech. They were not even saying
Yeah.
that. They just a CRM, like there were CRMs 15 years ago, and they built $1 billion
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
Now, when do
Yeah.
you realize
Yeah.
you hit a PMF for a company like this? Is that making
I think
sense?
the signals are similar, right? Like there is a problem market fit, right? So that much is true. You're solving a problem, the market cares about the problem. There's enough competition, the size is big enough. So you know, hey, this is where the incumbents are, and you have a good enough wedge to say, here is where a sliver of these people, like not everyone, but a sliver of these people deeply care about this two, 3 points, which based on interviews, we believe if we solve are better, right? So you start with that wedge. And if you start capturing market from that incumbent based on that wedge, and that's happening faster and at a reasonable CAC, and you're getting the right price for your product and so on and so forth, then you have PMF. Again, it goes back to the insight that you have, like with horizontal products, like let's say CRMs, right? Massive market. So you could simply say, like, I think
We
it
are a
was
cheaper
April
CRM.
Dunford.
That's what's been said a
A
lot of
cheaper
times, right?
CRM is I mean, cheaper is not always the best positioning, but there are times where cheaper works, right? For a lot
You
of people,
mentioned
cheaper
Odoo,
is
right? You mentioned
yeah,
Odoo, open source. I mean,
correct.
look at Odoo. It's
Yeah,
almost like some
yeah,
school kids,
crazy.
college kids were
Yeah,
building the product, and it's an open source. They say it's an open source suite.
correct.
I think
Yeah,
it's the promise is cheaper. That's
yeah.
the I don't see anything else where they could say
I
that
think
my
with SMEs care deeply about price, right? So SMEs as a market segment care a lot about price. Not that enterprises don't, but enterprises care equally about, let's say, security and reliability, and you're not going to disappear tomorrow. So if you see SME CRM as a category, there'll be like 100, 300 players in India alone, right? Like micro apps built in, or like small IT dev shops where you have custom solutions built for like specific markets, like people running small businesses like that already, right?
yeah.
Because SMEs are extremely price sensitive and they want something that just works, right? And it's easy to implement. And I like the other day, someone was showing me a CRM. He's like, this is so great, and I have all of these features. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at it, I'm like, yeah, this is every CRM. He's like, but the best part is it's just 3,000 rupees per employee per year for me.
Hmm.
And that's why, and this guy took the extra effort to customize it for me just so that my workflow is fitting in. And they send me updates on WhatsApp. And somehow that's a very valuable feature for a small
Hmm.
business owner
Wow.
managing a small sales team,
So
right? So
small
it's,
insight could actually
yeah,
be that wedge or that
yeah,
differentiator where your product market fit experiments could, try and
absolutely.
shape up. Yeah.
Also, there's industry verticalization, right? So, for example, someone made a CRM for VCs. VCs
Yes.
get a ton of pipeline and they
Heard
need to stay
about
on
that.
top of that pipeline. Someone made a CRM for investment banks, right? Because investment banks need specific workflows that you could theoretically, put all the piping together and customize something, or you can take something which is like, hey, this works beautifully out of the box. These guys, you're too small for them as a market. So this is our wedge. We're going to go in, we're going to make a specialized CRM for a high value audience that really, really cares about their time, and no one's really solving it. And there's a little bit of a market gap. And this could be, what, a 50 million business or a 100 million ARR business. Guess what? That's not a bad thing. Like, not every business has to be $1 billion ARR
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can make a 5-10 million ARR business, run it like a lifestyle business. There's nothing wrong with that. And or you get an exit after that. Like, I think those are very, very good goals to have, unlike what a lot of market lets you to believe.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think a powerful thing that you mentioned is that you get that decision at a $5 million ARR, maybe
Yeah.
period where, you have far more number of buyers possibly that you would
Mhm.
have in comparison to when you raised a Series B. So I think no,
Uh,
makes
yeah.
sense.
I'll give you an example of this. There's a CRM called Follow Up Boss in the US. So we used to work with them when we worked in the real estate market in the US. Great guys, built a very friendly, API friendly software. Damn good CRM, only built for real estate. I saw that CRM. I'm like, these guys would do so well in other industries. They didn't bother. They Fantastic CRM, works with everything, works beautifully, custom built workflows for real estate, sold to Zillow, I think a couple of years back for $500 million. It's nuts. Like, that's a wonderful outcome, right? So I think if markets are big enough, people, and you're solving a meaningful problem, even for a wedge, I think it's a good enough outcome to sort of consider that.
Wow, wow. I think beautiful insight. So I'll tell you what we are thinking of at Bound. We in the first few motion sets that we had defined for our
Yeah,
our product, we were thinking of only talking to fintech companies, considering they have compliance issues.
yeah,
BFSI, fintech, they love converting complicated customers with webinars, ebooks, white papers. And then we also just thought that, okay, let's also do health tech. But, then there's a question of, okay, no, let's just focus on these till we crack maybe a substantial size. So I think what you've just spoken about, it gives me a lot of clarity on how to kind of look at these signals. But I think it shows, I mean, all the reading that you do and, the depth that you go into. I'm glad that I've asked you some of the questions that I've asked because, it helps me clear some of these fundamentals too.
I'm glad that was helpful. No, but I think to your point, right? Like ultimately, who cares the most about the value that you're bringing? Like if I'm a real estate company, do I care that much about compliance and education? Maybe. But if I'm in
Yeah,
healthcare or if I'm in finance, I may go to jail if this
yeah,
breaks, right? So the
yeah,
value prescribed to that is just much higher. Like I
yeah.
think insurance sales is a classic example. Like
Oh,
you could actually
yes.
be sued for mis-selling. So
Yeah.
compliance or education-based selling is just the most important thing for insurance companies. And guess what? Insurance salespeople suck at it.
And wealth
It's just,
management. I found
yeah,
similar
well managed,
problems in
very
wealth
big.
management.
Correct.
It's like
100%.
super costly to not approach it in the right way. And then the
Yeah.
acquisition of your new leads, let's say
Yeah.
you're finding an HNI in Europe, maybe a Middle East based guy who now has a lot of money and you just want him to park $100,000 with your wealth management advisory. And, the way you could bring that guy on board is education. So I think, yeah, you're so right. And let me tell you something interesting here. The conclusion, a lot of these decisions were done based on our banters with AI. A lot of people won't believe. Like we built extensive charts looking at just exactly this, who has it really important, like who would value this the most. Like you're right, maybe real
Yeah.
estate would benefit this with this as well, but they don't have like they say vitamin versus painkiller, who could this
Yeah.
really potentially kill pain with. Yeah, I think fantastic insights there. But let me just I know that we're getting close to the designated time. Let's deep dive into the conversation around sales and how do you build a great team. Top 5 or 10 points. I know you have like literally hundreds of nuggets that I could pick, but I think let's have the 10 most important steps. And if you could give them in sequence, like let's say you join a new startup, or you're starting a new company, and this is an enterprise or a mid-market SaaS, 10 things and in the order that you would do to build a
Wow.
great
Okay.
team.
This is giving me something to think about. Let me see. I think the first thing is you have to decide what's your motion. Are you selling to enterprises, mid-market, geography, just basic stuff like that, right? Because if you're selling ticket field sales, you need a very, very different type of GTM motion. If you're selling product-led growth with an upsell angle versus you need a very different GTM motion. If you're selling inside sales, very different. And somewhere in between that, there's a valley of death in SaaS, right? Where you're just selling a complicated product, but the ticket size is not high enough. And that's where you sort of lose out because the cost of sale is very difficult to recover. So I love first initially going to the mathematics of it, right? Like what's my, average ticket size, what kind of base case, good, bad scenarios of, upsell or churn can I project? Based on that, can I like sort of just go back and see how much money will I make from a account? Then comes very importantly margins. Like if you're SaaS, you're probably at 80% margin. If you're AI, you're probably at 50, 60. I think if you're services, you're at 30, 20 to 30, right? Now your margins define how much cost of sales can you attribute to it. For example, SaaS benchmark is 5 to 1, right? Like, so you can spend you can get one salesperson for $1. They get you about $5 ARR. aside from like marketing and other spends that you do, which are obviously much higher. Uh, Versus if your services, I sometimes go as far as high as 20x, right? So if I'm selling 100 rupees in services revenue, my sales cost should be anywhere between 5% to 8% of my cost, of my revenue. That should be my sales cost, and then marketing, and then my margin. So I need to just first, I think, very simply understand one, market motions, price, and everything else. Then my mathematics in terms of how many salespeople can I afford with this? What's my break-even time? How many people should I hire, and so on and so forth. So that's just the analytical side of things. From there, identifying if you're early, let's say you've already established product market fit, you have let's say one or two early salespeople who are like, your founder type personas. Let's say you've done some of that. I think the most important initial step is to get the marketing and the demand gen engine going first before you start putting more salespeople in. Because guess what? If you get salespeople and you don't give them demos, they're not going to be successful. No matter how hard, like, look, salespeople should get their own demos. And I think that's a fair expectation. But not every salesperson is good at demo generation. Some salespeople are just very good at selling. And I would much rather optimize for strength than solve for weakness. So fundamentally, my school of thought is demand gen is one of the most important, if not the most important function that precedes sales and sort of grows with sales together. So is your demo setting set up engine, be it inbound, outbound, community, referral channel, whatever you're using, is that working well? And it should ideally be one channel that is driving a bulk of your demand.
Mm.
Outbound is the most common because inbound is expensive, takes time. Most people use outbound. Some people do communities, some people do referral channels,
Yeah.
different GTM motions. I'll not go into that detail, but whatever that channel is should be working. It shouldn't be like I have 5 channels and all of them are doing 20%. That's hard to scale. So having one channel that works really well is important. From there, let's say your demand gen team is set, account-based marketing engine or your cold email engine, your cold calling team, your inbound referral program, whatever it is, right? Like whatever channel strategy works there. From there, you need to have a very clear enablement function for your sales team. I think actually enablement comes slightly later. Maybe one step from here is what is an ideal salesperson for your team, right? Principles, what I look for, again, inspired by HubSpot, is coachability, curiosity, prior success, intelligence, and work ethic. These are the 5 skills that attribute highest to sales, performance success. Coachability being one of the most important ones. So you interview for some of these skills on their own, and then you ideally find parallels to your product in the industries. For example, we sell tech first contact centers for B2C brands. Now, my parallel is another call center executive, right, who sold call centers in the traditional sense. And in hindsight, that's been a structure that's not really very well worked for us, because the type of contact center sales that happens is very real estate focused, versus we sell very analytically in terms of, you know, customer journeys and ROI calculations and lead funnels and things like that, right? So what we needed was someone with a marketing background or a martech background or a CRM sales background or an analytics sales background, right? Someone who's very comfortable discussing numbers and analytics and understanding client marketing very well. So, regardless, identify what are the skills needed for your salesperson in order to sell your product well, which is really a function of the value that your product is driving. Another way to do that is at scale, you can manufacture this. Again, HubSpot's example, they do this really well. They actually get salespeople to design their own website using the HubSpot product on a theme that they care about. Like, I like football, I'll make a website about football, and I'll
Yeah.
use the HubSpot product to generate leads. And so I have gone through the motion of using my product. So when I enable my customer, I am able to do that a lot better, right? So looking for those skills, you should have a list of these are the five sales skills that are important to me. Here are the five other attributes that tie into the value of my product in terms of the type of sales that I want to do. I want someone who's very good at math. I like people who are good at Excel. I like people who can go into a board meeting and hold their own. I like people who are extremely high energy and detail oriented. And so there are aspects of skills and culture that you sort of define. It's important to be intentional about it. Otherwise, you're just, you could go through a lot of trial and error to get to that. But it's better to be intentional and say, this is my hypothesis. You could be wrong, and that's okay. Right. So let's say you bring in your first two, three, four, always hire in pairs, standard sales advice. You get those people in. Then the enablement is one of the most important things. You get enablement of the sellers incorrect. It's very difficult for them to succeed. Now there are lots of tools out there in terms of AI call recordings and the training modules, LMSs, all of that exists. But I think you need people who can sort of you're a startup. You can't wait 6 months for someone to succeed. So you need as part of culture, you still need people who can, just sort of get their hands dirty and get running very quickly and not waiting for perfection to start pitching your product. So you may want to test for some of these things early on in terms of just the ability to absorb information and sort of run with it, right? Especially in early stages, you will have a lot of information getting thrown at you. You need people who are intelligent, who can absorb that information and sort of run with that faster. So your enablement time is, let's say, not 3 months, but 1 month because this person is just smarter. And that requires work for you to figure out, but that's an important thing. I think within the enablement, now really comes the more important pieces, which is one area that you're also trying to solve, which is the customer education angle. Today, a seller has, let's say, all the information. A buyer already has 80% of that information. A buyer already knows so many of these things already, right? Like they're looking at you as a seller and saying, educate me, help me understand how to make this decision, help me understand what my competitors are doing, help me understand so that I don't make a regret sale, right? Buyers, in an ideal world, buyers would make these decisions on their own, except we don't live in an ideal world and buyers are worried about making a bad choice. Hence, the seller comes in. Our job is to help you decide, not to make a sale. That's the distinction between old school selling and pushy selling to now modern selling, right? So your sellers need to be enabled on how are my buyers deciding. I have enough context about their industry, their problems, my customer stories from my early customers. What is, if I were in their shoes, how would I decide? So all the education that we drive alongside the sales conversation, which is a combination of the content as well as the seller being enabled on that content. And being able to sort of paraphrase that content in different contexts of, if you're talking to a CEO, this is what is important. If you're talking to a CFO, this is what is important. How should your language and your questioning change? I think that is one of the most overlooked aspects of enablement, I feel, because we assume that we just give people the product and we give them two demo recordings and like now go sell, right? That doesn't work. You have to sort of tailor everything to the buyer. And this is where I found that buyer journeys are very helpful, right? Like helping build empathy across the org, marketing, sales, customer success on how the buyers are deciding, and then sort of calibrating that entire journey for the buyer. Lastly, I think couple of things that I would do in addition to all this is get everyone really, really good on using Gen AI for research. I think we have all the tools. There's no more excuses. I'm surprised at the number of times people just show up to meetings unprepared. It's just extremely disappointing. And I don't think anyone wants to feel like that anymore. A buyer should walk into a meeting and feel like, holy shit, you know so much about my business already. And that's credibility getting defined right there very, very well. Second is lots of training around emotional intelligence in selling, as well as the storytelling aspect of selling. Again, two overlooked aspects, right? We live in a very transactional world, yet all sales are still selling to humans. So making sure that people are much more emotionally attuned to how the product is bought, what the buyer is thinking, what are the things that they're not telling you. Like really just opening up the dialogues with them to say, hey, you seem hesitant about this. Can you walk me through what you're feeling? When you're looking at our product, what are the risks that are going on in your mind? Right? Like no one does that. It's just like the risk is there and the risk will derail your deal. But none of us actually go out there and ask that in just a nice, empathetic human way. And I think those are some of the big differentiators between, the best sellers and everybody else. Because the sales experience, especially in B2B, is going to, define how your product is, bought, used, referred. If you do a pushy sale and somehow, like just stick the product to someone who doesn't need it, you're gonna have churn, you're gonna have a bad mouthing customer, and all of those signals are very important and go as part of the training as well as the culture of the sales team that you said, right? So I think, sorry, I went on a bit of a
No, this was
journey
a
there,
masterclass
but
in how to do this right. And I mean, so much of value, man. We've got to do a course on all of this. Rishabh, I'm telling you that what you just said, there are so many playbooks here that people would want to kind of really consume in much more detail, like training. Do I start at one person? Give me ABCD, because see, execution is where the real results really
yeah,
start showing up. And
yeah.
you have done this, you've been there, and you've excelled at it. So I would say that we need to build a course and an elaborate playbook around a lot of these things.
No, I appreciate that, Kinnard. Before I forget, one more extremely critical thing: revenue operations. Hire RevOps sooner rather than later. People wait. People wait to, RevOps ratios are like, when I have 10 sellers, get a RevOps guy. No, get it at like early stages. This person is responsible for like just tying in your marketing and your sales and keeping your
Mm.
CRM hygiene, all your systems talking to each other and making sure your notes are logged and deals are moving fine and your CRM is well set and you have forecasting discipline. Because, very soon salespeople are great at telling stories. Like very soon, like it's very easy for the salesperson to come into a meeting and be like, you know what? Yeah, this deal. Oh yeah, this happened and this happened. Versus saying, hey, there's not been like we've not sent an email in 15 days and everything is automatically logged. So what the hell are you doing, right?
That's like the
Or this deal is not. Yeah,
in this world of call centers, those are the guys
yeah,
really that we in enterprise and mid-market sales, we call them RevOps, but those are really the
yep,
line managers, or the
yeah. The QA manager, or it could be even a TL or a floor manager in terms of just someone
yeah.
who is constantly looking at numbers
What's that ideal
and the
profile?
quality.
How would you say to
Not a
someone?
seller, not a seller. This
Of
is
course
someone.
not.
So
Yeah.
you have RevOps guys now in the market, which
Uh,
is a good thing. These guys are like great at making reports. They're very good at Excel.
yeah.
They're very good
Yeah.
at CRMs. They're very good at like like for me, like my favorite interview question is, hey, which is your best favorite CRM? Which is your most favorite CRM and why?
Great.
And hey, can you show me? I am going into a quarterly board meeting. What are the 5 reports that you'll give me, right? And
Mm.
if someone understands those things, that means they've done this, right? You can obviously teach for this. You can tell people what you're looking for, but you need someone who is culturally okay to be hated by everybody else in the team because it's their job to nag every seller.
Yeah.
And so we've had decent luck with the couple of RevOps guys we've had at Scott, and they do really well. But they sort of help keep the system in check because you need someone who's almost like a red team to say, hey, you put this number on the board, is this real or not? Oh yeah, you say it's real. Here is what the data is saying. And so forcing everyone to have that data driven conversation along with the story driven conversation. You need the story. You need the story and the details behind an account and why some things are not working or what product gaps exist, etc. But you also need the data, and that's very easy to quantify today. And if you can't hire a
Mm.
RevOps person, there are like a million RevOps tools now that will integrate with your CRM and your
Mm.
call recording tools and your emails and your calendar, and they'll tell you what work has happened on each deal. At least you have something to work on.
I think AI will solve this. I feel like all that we need
Yeah,
from a RevOps person, AI agents ought to solve this. And I think it
yeah,
exists already. It's just stitching it all together.
it does.
But yeah,
Stitching it all together, yeah, but also asking the right question. Now,
yeah.
using that to say, hey, now the RevOps role, like the GTM role is now like a GTM engineer, right? Like the SDR role is now moving to a GTM engineer. The RevOps maybe is moving to like a RevOps engineer sort of a role where this person sort of tying in all of these million AI sales tech tools that are out there, which are expensive, and just making sure each one's getting used correctly and the data flow is easy for leadership to consume to make sense of. Like
Yeah.
it's very easy to look at 20 dashboards. It doesn't really help me looking at that, right? Someone needs to weave that story together and also ask the right questions of the sales team in those meetings. So very critical role. I agree with you. AI can solve it. Yeah. On the training part, I actually, funny that you say it. I do that already. And that's in my weekend time and nights time. I teach classes on sales, different aspects of it, bringing in some of these modern elements into it, bringing in Gen AI into sales in a big way. So
Wow.
I
Wow.
am working on creating more such courses, but yeah, some of it is already going on.
No, we've got.
I lost audio there for a second.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we should
Yeah,
definitely jam on that and
yeah, yeah, 100%.
brainstorm. I'll kind of ping you and we should meet separately online and talk about that. There are a lot of synergies there because that's what we've done for a long while. But no, I think with that, I think we've kind of gone a bit over the limit that we had decided. But it was such an engrossing conversation, so many mini masterclasses kind of bundled in. Thank you so much for laying it all down and elaborating it all so well. Really appreciate the time, Rishabh. And I feel like, this is one of those conversations where I feel I've eaten enough, but I want to eat more. So, it's,
I'm glad.
yeah, yeah, we've got to do this again with maybe deep dives and stuff. But thank you so
Yeah,
much for your time, and have a great time shifting. I know you're moving from Hyderabad to Bangalore, and
Bangalore. Yes,
yeah, yeah, I hope to see you soon. And, I'll ping you and
100%.
would love to contribute and, work and support the mission that you have, like have better salespeople in the country and empower
Yeah.
people.
No,
So,
absolutely, Kinnor. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. It's the first time I'm doing something like this, and super fun because I think you're a nerd when it comes to this stuff as well, and I think I see that and I appreciate it, and I especially when you articulated the vision of what you're doing with Edbound, I think it just so deeply resonated with me because I am just tired of just going in unprepared and like going in and not educating your buyer, right? And for me, this is one of the like de facto things that a salesperson needs to do. Your demo has to be so good that someone just pays for that, right? And I think a big part of what you do falls within that bucket of just sort of educating the market on your point of view. I think that's
yeah.
one of the biggest differences that GTM will have in this world of AI noise is to keep that perspective and education because people still want to be told what to do. A salesperson, people will not go anywhere. You need someone to point a finger at as well. You need someone to help you with the buying decision. But I think that enablement in different ways, especially from a content point of view on the industry perspective that you bring is so important. So I'm really excited for what you're building and yeah, happy to be a supporter on the side.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll connect soon. Thank you so much for the time, Bishop. Take care.
See you. See
Thanks.
you,
Bye.
Kinner. Take care. Bye.